Let's get to canning this blueberry maple syrup. I have washed the blueberries very well. I will be using my Presto digital pressure canner because it's just so easy. It's a pressure canner and you can also water bath can. And I don't have to keep an eye on it regularly. It's got lots of automatic function. I have filled my water on that fill line and added a splash of vinegar to prevent scaling. We'll be following the instructions that was provided to us. And then I'll be plugging in this pressure canner or water bath canner, and we'll be following the prompts that it gave us. It automatically goes to pressure canner once you plug it in. I'm just adding the little gasket there. And then to move it to water bath can, and you just rotate that knob to the side and it's going to say boiling water can. Then press the knob in to get the process started. After that, you set up the time of how long you're supposed to process the jars based upon the recipe. Once you do that, the canner is going to prompt you to insert your jars. And when you do have to fill your jars halfway full or a little bit more to keep the jars down instead of floating. And we'll also be using the water to refill the canner later on. This will help warm up our jars so it doesn't shock and break. Here are all the jars I'll be using. Place the lid on the canner. Match the install remove line on the U line so that it'll sit perfectly. Then you're gonna rotate that until the lock line matches the U line. From there, you know that it's really locked. We're not going to use the regulator because that's for pressure canning only. We're going to leave the arm sensor up, then push the knob in to start the jar warming process. I'll be using the blueberry maple syrup recipe from Canning for a New Generation, and that's going to start off with 3 pounds of fresh blueberries washed. Then we're going to add 3 tablespoons of fresh lemon juice. And the last ingredient is 1.5 cups of maple syrup. Now, the recipe says grade B, but they're all now grade A. As long as you're using the dark, robust maple syrup, that's what we're looking for. I'm going to scrape all of that goodness into the pot. And I do have the stove on medium heat because we want to bring this to a simmer and cook until all the juices covers the blueberry. I added my lids in a pot of water to warm up, not boil, just warm. The canner just beeped to let us know it's now good to fill our jars. I'm not ready yet, so it's okay to keep your jars in here nice and warm while we're getting everything else ready. I'll also be boiling water in my electric kettle to make sure I'll have enough boiling water to fill the top of the jars later. The syrup's now ready, so let's get started on filling these jars. I have my ladle to scoop it out. Then I'm going to take my jar lifter and lift a jar up, then pour out the water inside the jar back into the pot. Place that on my cutting board. Then I'm going to be filling this. I'll be using my funnel that has a measuring right on it so I can tell right away with which headspace I have. So I want to make sure that there's enough blueberries for all cans and there's equal amounts. So just wanting to make sure too that there's enough syrup on there. Make sure to keep an eye on that headspace. We're looking for a 1/4 inch headspace. That proper amount of headspace is going to allow us to have enough vacuum to seal those jars. Too much, we're going to end up with some siphoning and jars not sealing. Now that I've filled my jars, I'll be using my debubbler to make sure there's no empty pockets of air there, and just scrape the debubbler along the sides of your jar. You don't have to use a debubbler. You can use something plastic or a chopstick. And typically when you do debubble, you'll end up with more headspace. So I always like to double check and then refill as needed to make sure I have the proper headspace in each jar. Now that's looking good, so I'll be taking my paper towel. I'll be pouring some vinegar on that, and I'm going to use that paper towel with vinegar to wipe the rims of my jar, just to make sure that it's not sticky, there's no food debris on there, and increasing the likelihood of our jars and our lid sealing. And then I'll be taking my magnetic tool, take out a lid. I was struggling. And then place the lid on the jar to make sure it's centered. Then take a ring, screw that onto the jar. When you do this, you just want to screw it fingertip tight. You don't want your wrist rotating, just fingertip tight. That's all you need. Then place the jar back into the pot of or the canner for water bath canning. Let's do this again. Pour the hot water out of the jar into the pot. Then place your funnel on top of the jar. Fill it with your syrup, jam, whatever it may be. And make sure that you have the proper headspace when you're filling this. Again, I'm just trying to keep the same amount of blueberries and syrup in each jar. Keep an eye out on that headspace, making sure we are where we need to be. I can't talk. Take your debubbler, scrape the sides, making sure there's no empty space in there. And then when you debubble, always check for headspace again, as it tends to sink. So here I am checking for my headspace, and come to find out, as usual, it settled in a bit more, so we'll add some more syrup to reach that proper headspace. Then take your paper towel with vinegar, wipe the rims to make sure there's no debris on your rim so that your lid can seal properly. Take the magnetic tool, grab a lid, put it on top of your jar, making sure it's nice and centered. Then screw a ring on, fingertip tight, nothing too wild. You don't need your extra muscles on here, just fingertip tight. Then the jar lifter back into the pot. Here are all our syrups ready for water bath canning. Pour boiling water on top of your jar so that we have the proper amount. We need at least 1 inch of water above the jars. And here I am. I will measure this to make sure. I was at, I think, 1.5 inches on this, 1.25 inches, so we're good to go. Then place your lid on, matching the install remove line to the U-line so that it sits in, rotate, lock line on the U-line. Then you're going to place your sensor arm down, then rotate it underneath the handle. Then press the knob in to start our canning process. The canner will warm up first to reach the proper temperature and pressure within the canner. Once that is ready, it will start the canning process and count it down. And here we are starting our canning process. Once it's done, it will then alert us that it's time to cool down. Canner will give us another 5 minutes for that cool down process. And then what I'm going to do next is take a towel, not bare hands. Take a towel to protect yourself. Open up the arm sensor and then lift. For that cool down process, we're going to remove the lid. And to remove, you're going to rotate the lid and then lift the lid away from you because there's going to be plenty of heat and hot water. You always want to protect yourself. Like I tell my daughter, safety first. Once the cool down process is over, the canner will beep. Press the X button and hold it for 3 seconds to end it. We're now going to Gently remove the jars from our canner using our jar lifter. Then we're going to place these jars on top of a towel to cool down. Once we place them on that towel, don't move them, don't look at them. We are going to leave it alone for at least 12 hours before we even think about moving them. This ensures that our jars will seal. Here they are. I was able to can 8 jars of blueberry maple syrup. And I made myself a protein waffle and I just drizzled some of the blueberries and the syrup on there. I know there's no butter. I'm trying to eat a little healthier here sometimes, okay? But this was so good. The blueberries popped every bite, and then having those chunks of blueberries were just divine. Please try it. You're not going to regret it. Thanks for watching the video. Bye.